All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to break down the Green Party's platform on social justice. It's a pretty detailed vision for America, and it really tries to tackle some of the country's deepest-rooted problems head-on.
So, to really get a handle on their platform, you have to start right here. The whole thing is basically framed by one core diagnosis, a crisis of inequality. This idea, this widening gap between the wealthy and everyone else, that's the problem they see as the root of it all. And you'll see how it shapes every single policy proposal we're about to get into.
Okay, here's our game plan. We'll start with how they see the crisis, then jump into their solutions for equality, justice, and the borders, and the economy. Finally, we'll see how they tie it all together. All right, first up, an America in crisis. Now, the key thing to understand about the Green Party's diagnosis is that they don't see these as separate, isolated problems. Nope. They describe a whole web of interconnected crises. You've got economic hardship, public services being starved of funds, and what they call a serious erosion of our civil liberties. And they use some really stark numbers to drive this home. Take this one, 50 million. That's the number of Americans they say have zero medical insurance. For them, a number like that isn't just a statistic, it's a massive red flag. It's proof positive that the social safety net is failing and needs a complete overhaul, not just a little tweak. Okay, so that's the problem. What about the solutions? Well, let's dive into their platform for equality. This is really the first major pillar of their vision, and it's all about creating a framework to guarantee civil and equal rights for absolutely everyone. And they kick things off by going right at what they call the historical system of patriarchy. Their argument is pretty straightforward. You simply can't have a real democracy if women don't have full equality. So they call for some pretty fundamental changes to get there. So what does that actually look like? Well, their proposals are pretty sweeping. We're talking about finally ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, to put equality right into the Constitution. Then there's protecting reproductive rights as non-negotiable, making sure there's equal pay for jobs of equal worth, and even passing CEDAW, which is a major UN treaty on eliminating discrimination against women. Next up, the platform takes on the legacy of slavery and systemic discrimination head-on. And, it's not just about acknowledging the history. They go a step further and lay out a very specific agenda for the Black community. And when they talk about reparations, their definition is super specific. They frame it as a debt, not as charity. That's a huge distinction for them. They're basically saying this is about settling a long overdue bill, a financial and moral one, owed by the government and corporations that actually profited from slavery and exploitation. And you can really see their multi-pronged approach here. It's not just one thing. You've got direct financial compensation, right, through a reparations trust fund. But then you also have cultural justice, like protecting African-American cemeteries, and restorative justice, like giving back land that was stolen through discriminatory practices. It's a really comprehensive view. The platform also lays out a really firm commitment to LGBTQIA+ rights. The goal here is full legal and political equality for everyone, no matter their sexual orientation or gender identity. So how do they propose doing that? Well, you can kind of see a two-part strategy. First, on the home front, they want to write these protections directly into major federal laws, like the Civil Rights Act. But then, they also want to use America's influence abroad, ending military aid to governments that persecute LGBTQIA+ people. So it's both a domestic and a foreign policy issue for them. Okay, let's switch gears and see how all this applies to two of the most hotly debated topics in America today, reforming the justice system and our borders. And they start with a statistic that is just staggering. 25%. The U.S. has less than 5% of the world's population, but holds 25% of its prisoners. Just let that sink in for a second. For the Green Party, this isn't just a number. It's the core of their argument that mass incarceration is a broken, inhumane system. And this chart does a great job of showing the massive shift in thinking they're proposing. So instead of the war on drugs, they say, let's treat drug abuse like the public health issue it is. Instead of rigid mandatory sentencing, let's give judges back their discretion. And this is a huge one. Get rid of private for-profit prisons altogether. The idea is to take the profit motive out of locking people up. When it comes to immigration, they're not talking about small fixes. They're calling for a complete overhaul. The whole focus is on creating what they call a humane pathway to citizenship. This means recognizing the reality that millions of undocumented residents are already here, contributing to the economy and our communities, and creating a clear, efficient process for them.
All right, now let's get into the economic piece of their social justice platform. Because you can't really talk about justice without talking about money and security, right? Their main goal here is pretty clear. Build a strong social safety net that actually supports all Americans.
And the absolute centerpiece of their economic vision is this: single-payer, universal healthcare. They are crystal clear on this point. For them, healthcare is a fundamental human right, period. Not a perk you get with a good job, not a privilege for those who can afford it, but a right for every single resident.
But it definitely doesn't stop at healthcare. Look at these other proposals. A universal basic income to make sure no adult is living below the poverty line. A real living wage that keeps up with inflation. A guarantee of affordable, secure housing. And protecting Social Security from privatization. You put all these together and you get a picture of an economy where everyone's basic needs are covered, just as a starting point.
Okay, so we've looked at civil rights, the justice system, the economy, a lot of different pieces. So the big question is, how does the Green Party connect all these dots?
Well, the platform's answer is actually pretty simple. They believe these aren't separate issues. They see them as completely intertwined. You can't fix one without addressing the others. And that really brings us to the core belief of the whole platform. It's this idea that social justice, economic justice, and even environmental justice are all fundamentally connected. You can't pull one thread without affecting the others. For them, you just can't have one without the others. They're all different sides of the same coin.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, right? The platform definitely lays out a sweeping, interconnected vision. So it makes you wonder, what would it really take to build a society based on these principles? What would the challenges be? And what might the opportunities look like?